Ahoy there, Captain Benzie here, coming at you with another ship fitting guide for EVE Echoes, but with a difference. Rather than just examining one specific ship, today we're going to be looking at the entire line of Cormorant destroyers. We've already discussed the Thrasher and the Cursor, so it only seemed fair that we moved on and gave the Caldari State equal treatment. As such, we're going to be looking at the Cormorant, how to get started on this line, what this ship does and how you can fit it, and then where to progress from there, looking at the Cormorant II, the Cormorant Navy issue, and even the Cormorant Guardian briefly. Now, if you do enjoy this video or find it useful, let me know by hitting like on it, subscribe to the channel for all things EVE Echoes, ding that notification bell so that you never miss a video, and let me know what topics and ships you want to see me cover in future videos by commenting down below. Finally, if you do want to go the extra mile to help support this channel, you can do so by joining us on Patreon using the link shown on screen now. That said and done then, let's talk about the Cormorant line of destroyers. The Cormorant is the Caldari State mainline destroyer, which means of course we can find it at tech level 3 on the destroyer branch of the Caldari State ship tree. Being tech level 3 means it is seeded at every ITC in the game. You can purchase one of these directly for about 175,000 ISK, not overly expensive, and if you do lose it in combat you can use those beginner insurance vouchers to bring it right back. This makes it fairly inexpensive and fairly disposable. You can kind of get these destroyed and just bring them back nice and cheaply without worrying about it too much. They do also get some really cool looking skins on this one. I do really like the red ochre, which is one of the ones you can actually get using the Museum Arcana Scholar points, and it's obviously the one I've used for the thumbnail. Very handsome looking ship. Looking at the attributes and fittings here, you can see that the fitting profile of the Cormorant is identical to the other tech level 3 mainline destroyers. 3 high slots, 2 mid slots, and 3 low slots. Gives it a fair amount of variability of different ways that you can fit this. Looking at its defences as well, 2,830 is slightly lower than some of the other destroyers, but it is all put into the shield there. 1,019 hit points in the shield, 688 on armour, 698 on structure. This is most certainly a shield tank. When we start putting in like tanking modules onto this, it is shield tanking that we're going to be looking at. As we look further down the stats here, you can see that a signature radius of 67.4 meters means that this is on the larger side of the destroyers. It's fairly easy to lock onto and hit, but it is a tech level 3 ship, what do we expect? And its flight velocity of 226 meters per second is fairly middling also. Not overly great on those stats, but it does progress as we go higher up the Cormorant line, as we'll see later. A scan resolution of 480 is fairly useful though. That does mean that this locks onto other ships fairly quickly. Looking at the trait description here and the different skill bonuses, the roll bonus for the Cormorant is just like the other mainline destroyers in that it is a 25% increase to the optimal range of the mainline weapon, in this case, small railguns. This is further proven with small railgun operation bonus being the weapon skill that applies to this ship. 6% small railgun damage. Obviously if you have that at full level 5, that's a 30% increase to small railgun damage, which kind of makes the 3 turrets act as if they're 4, and you get a 5% increase to small railgun optimal range. That means again with that trained up, that's a 25% increase to the small railgun optimal range, on top of the roll bonus's 25% increase as well, which is what makes this actually surprisingly useful for using Snub-Nosed Railguns, because you are getting a big increase to the optimal range there, meaning this is one of the few ships that can actually pull off using small Snub-Nosed Railguns, otherwise not a great weapon system. But again, we'll come to that later. Finally then, Destroyer Command bonus here, 5% shield per level. That means obviously at full Destroyer Command 5, that's an additional 25% shield. Now when it says 25% shield, that literally just means the shield is going to be bigger. So if you've got here 1019, we'll round that to 1000, it means you're going to be sitting at closer to 1250 if you have Destroyer Command trained all the way up to level 5, which quite frankly, if you like the Cormorant and you like using your destroyers, is a skill you really should get maxed out as soon as possible. So let's look at how to actually fit the Cormorant for PvE. In the high slots here, I've gone for 3 Mark V small snub-nosed railguns. But hang on Benzie, didn't you say in previous videos that small snub-nosed railguns are the worst weapon system in EVE Echoes? Why would you choose to fit one of those to one of your ships? Well, ultimately the reason that small snub-nosed railguns are terrible is their abysmal range. Very short optimal range, incredibly rapid accuracy fall-off. That means that even though the DPS looks great on paper, in this case 40.96 per turret, the range is almost impossible to maintain, meaning you never actually get that amount of damage. There are two notable exceptions to this rule. The first is the Cormorant II that has enough inertia that it can maintain a 1 kilometer orbit pretty well, and thus can use those small snub-nosed railguns at optimal range. The other is the Cormorant line of destroyers. Thanks to having that roll bonus of 25% increase to small railgun optimal range, plus having the small railgun operation skill bonus of, again, up to 25% optimal range, you can actually push these up. In this case, I've only got small railgun operation at 4, I've managed to push that optimal range up to 2.43 kilometers. This suddenly makes a difference, because a 3 kilometer orbit is something that the Cormorant can do. It can pull off that kind of orbit and thus sit pretty much just outside the optimal range, doing still 95% of its damage. That is the advantage here of the Cormorant, and the reason that we go for those small snub-nosed railguns. You can see here 122.88 DPS. That is huge, absolutely monstrous for a Tech Level 3 destroyer, and should be more than capable of clearing Tech Level 4 anomalies, and actually multiple of the Tech Level 5, despite the fact that it's only a Tier 3 ship. In order to maintain this though, we do need a Mark V small afterburner. With obviously that very short range on those turrets, we do need to get, yes, wait for it, up close and personal, TM, put it on a t-shirt, so we need to be able to maintain that range. We need to get into that range and actually be able to hold onto it. That's where the afterburner comes into play here. It allows us to maintain an orbit of 3 kilometers around the target. Now, because if we're going to be at 3 kilometers, we're going to be taking a lot of damage, that's where a Mark V small shield booster comes in. Obviously, the Cormorant itself, for Destroyer Command, does get additional shield, bigger tank. Mark V small shield booster allows us to repair any incidental damage that is dealt to that tank. Ultimately, you're going to be taking damage, so we need something that is going to be able to repair it. And then finally, for the low slots, I've put a Mark V magnetic field stabilizer. This is a weapon upgrade module. Having this fitted to the ship gives a cold 5% damage increase, which takes us to that 122.88 DPS. You can then activate this for, I think it's, there we are, activation time 21 seconds. That will last then and give 7.06% additional DPS, which pushes this over 130 quite comfortably. That gives this a significant punch that can really do some quite hefty damage to ships much bigger than its size. Just to make sure that this has a little bit of extra survivability as well, a Mark V stasis weatherfire means that anything that's moving a little bit faster than us can be held in place. We can slow it right down so those turrets can track and make sure they do maximum damage. And because we're going to be so close, we may as well have a Mark V small energy Nosferatu. We're going to be within that 4 kilometers optimal range, so we can constantly be draining their capacitor, refilling ours, and using that to feed the afterburner and the shield booster. So if you've started with the Cormorant, where do you then go from there? Well, obviously, like the other mainline destroyers, there is an upgraded version at Tech Level 4. This is the Cormorant II. Gets a little bit of a different colour scheme. I do quite like the grey and orange on this one. Again, quite a handsome ship. Let's look at its attributes and fittings and see what's changed. Well, first thing that you should notice is that this suddenly has rigs. There are power grid rigs, and there are mechanical rigs, and we're going to have a look at what those do when we talk about the Cormorant Navy issue in just a moment. Most importantly, though, is we've gone from 3 high slots up to 4. That is already a 33% increase in our DPS across the board. Put it this way, if you've got 3 turrets doing 10 damage each, that's 30 damage. If you then have 4 turrets doing 10 damage each, that's 40 damage. 33% increase, a third extra DPS. That's huge. Looking at its defences as well, you can see the shield doesn't actually go up all that much for the Cormorant II, but it does get a bit more armour and structure. That just means that if your shield tank does fail, you've got a bit more time to get out of there before things go absolutely Pete-tong. Signature radius is still quite large on this ship, but it does have an increased flight velocity this time of 258. The warp speed's also gone up from 4.5 up to 5.0 AU per second. Scan resolution has also increased, making this thing lock on at an astonishing rate. Now, if you look at the trait descriptions here, the roll bonus is that same 25% increase to small railgun optimal range, but the railgun operation bonus has now changed. We still get the additional 7.5% small railgun optimal range, up to 37.5% this time around, which just makes those small snub-nosed railguns even better. The small railgun tracking speed is a new part of this bonus, which that just means it can track on a little bit faster. That weather isn't quite as important. But then we have small railgun damage has gone down. Well, yes, it kind of has. It's gone down to 2.5 this time, but remember, you've got 4 turrets now rather than just 3. So even though you're getting less from the skill, you're getting more from the turrets, and this still constitutes a significant damage per second upgrade. The Destroyer Command bonus then also remains as a 5% increase to shield. So the Cormorant II ultimately is a nice stepping stone on the way up. It can't be brought back with the insurance vouchers, and being tech level 4 you do have to buy it from other players on the market rather than it just being seeded at ITCs, but they are fairly cheap. You can usually pick these up for like literally 1 or 2 million a piece, and that's at market prices. If you've got friends who are shipbuilders, you should be able to get it even cheaper. Ultimately, significant DPS increase for going into one of these, and you can start looking into the use of rigs. But anyway, enough on this one, let's go up to the Cormorant Navy issue so we can talk about fitting it and where we go from here. The Cormorant Navy issue is the Tech 5 variant of the Cormorant, and again constitutes a fairly significant DPS upgrade, in fact a fairly good upgrade across the board from the Cormorant II. If the Cormorant 1 to the Cormorant II felt like a jump, the Cormorant II to the Cormorant Navy issue is an absolute leap. If we had a look across to the attributes and fittings here, you can see the fitting profile doesn't change all that much. It's still 4 high slots, 3 low slots, and 2 of each of the rigs, but we do gain an additional mid slot. This gives us a little bit more variety of what we do here, and it means that we can hold on to the same fittings that we were looking at before, but suddenly put a warp disruptor in if we want to take this for PvP. That's not to say that the Cormorant and the Cormorant II aren't viable in PvP, just you have to sacrifice either the Weber or the Nosferatu in order to hold onto a Warp Disruptor or a Warp Scrambler or something like that to actually lock your target down. Looking at its defense though, this is one of the big changes with the Cormorant Navy issue. That defense has rocketed up to 4,582. The shield has almost doubled, 1,650, it's a humongous increase, with armor over 1,000 and structure over 1,000 as well, 1,114 for the armor, 1,130 for the structure. This makes this a much more survivable ship, and as we start looking down at the rest of its stats here, you can see the signature radius is still slightly larger than some of the other destroyers, but we're not going for a speed tank here. Good flight velocity of 246, amazing scan resolution of 499, and that does only improve with the skills, as we'll see in a second. Flight velocity, warp speed, sorry, at 4.5 is a downgrade from the Cormorant II. It does take slightly longer to relocate through different systems than that, but yeah, it's a small price to pay for that significant increase there in defense straight away. And let's look at the trait descriptions. Still that same roll bonus as you would expect from a Cormorant, but small railgun operation now gives an additional small railgun optimal range of 7.5% as we saw before, 37.5% optimal range increase on that for level 5, plus a small railgun damage boost of 5%. That is double the skill benefit of what the Cormorant II had, and pushes this into some rather terrifying DPS numbers. Destroyer Command, now in addition to giving the 5% shield, also gives a 5% increase to scan resolution, which is the skill we saw down here, sorry, the stat we saw down here, 499, plus 5% per level of Destroyer Command means that the Cormorant Navy issue can lock onto targets at an astonishing speed. Fitting the Cormorant Navy issue is a fairly simple affair of essentially scaling up what you've already done for the Cormorant and the Cormorant II. The high slots we've gone for here are 4 dealer small snub-nosed railguns. These are the storyline variant of the small snub-nosed railguns and are fairly cheap on the market, since a lot of people are doing those storyline missions, things like the super soft drink mission, the ones you get from doing the scrolls, and not a lot of people are using small snub-nosed railguns, which means there are an awful lot of these on the market at a surprisingly cheap price. Now you can see here the bonuses from the Cormorant Navy issue, the fact that it gets that little bit extra there on the optimal range is already giving a 2.63 kilometer optimal range on the Cormorant Navy issue small snub-nosed railguns, and remember I'm only at small railgun operation 4. At railgun 5 that almost reaches 3 kilometers on its own, which is a significant increase in your ability to actually apply this damage. The low slots are pretty much identical: Mark 5 small shield booster, Mark 5 gyro stabilizer, and a Mark 7 small afterburner. Ultimately I didn't have 2 Mark 5 afterburners, but a Mark 7 obviously works slightly better as well. It gives you a slightly higher flight velocity adjustment, always worth going for the best ones you can fit. The mid slots again are still a small energy Nosferatu and a status Weber fire. Those are fairly standard equipment for a Cormorant. Now, because this one can suddenly be a bit more viable in PvP, I've put in a Mark V Warp Disruptor here. Obviously, the better Warp Disruptors you can put in, the better, the more capable you're going to be of locking someone down, but a standard Mark V Warp Disruptor is often enough to take out someone else in PvP, like other frigates and destroyers, simply because those very rarely fit for warp stability. No need to, so a Mark V Warp Disruptor is usually enough. And it's just the fact that the Cormorant Navy issue gets that third mid-slot, which means we don't have to lose either the Weber Fire or the Nosferatu. If you did want to go into PvP with the Cormorant or the Cormorant II, it is the Weber Fire I would usually lose. Keep the Nosferatu, swap the Weber Fire out for the Warp Disruptor instead. Now, looking at the rigs, which are a sudden option here, I'm only using the prototype rigs that you get from the daily login rewards, just to showcase what those would be. Obviously, if you're going into a Cormorant Navy issue and actually looking to use this as your mainline ship, then you're going to want to upgrade these to at least the Tech 1 variant, if not the Tech Level 2. The way that works out best for your DPS is a Railgun Collision Accelerator, which is the flat damage bonus increase for your railguns, and a Railgun Burst Aerator prototype. This reduces the time it takes to actually fire those railguns. Obviously, damage per second can be increased either by increasing the total amount of damage, or reducing the amount of increasing the amount of shots over time. Damage per second, you can increase the second, or you can increase the damage side of things. That gives us a significant DPS increase. For the mechanical rigs, we've gone for an auxiliary thruster, just because this increases that flight velocity, allows us to get right up into their face that little bit faster, and the polycarbon engine housing, again inertia modifier, helps us maintain that 3-kilometer orbit at a higher speed. Higher speed in an orbit means a higher transverse velocity, higher angular velocity means less damage coming in. Less damage coming in means less for your shield booster to have to repair. Ultimately, just helps you out and makes you that little bit more survivable. Excellent ship with the the magnetic field stabilizer cold. This is already 199.88. Activating that does push it over the 200 DPS margin, meaning this is quite a hefty punch for a ship of this size. The Navy issue isn't where the Cormorant line of destroyers ends though, so if we head back into the Caldari State ship tree and head up the line here, eventually you'll find at Tech Level 5 next to the Navy issue is the Cormorant Guardian. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on this one in this video. The Cormorant Guardian is a very different type of ship. Whereas the Cormorant II, and the Cormorant Navy issue are all about dealing that damage, and ultimately are great little solo ships, the Cormorant Guardian is designed for operations in a fleet, or at least in a wolf pack. That is a small group with some friends of similar size. Ultimately, what the Cormorant Guardian does is it sacrifices one of the high slots, going from 4 down to 3, to increase the low slots from 3 up to 4. Now this makes it a very tanky ship. You can add on extra damage absorption there, things that allow it to take even more damage, and you can see the shield there, 1,793. That is a very large shield for a ship this size. Large signature radius, not much else in the way here. If we look at the trait description, you get a small shield resistance bonus, railgun tracking speed and optimal range, but not damage to your railguns. Ultimately, the main reason of the Cormorant Guardian is here in the roll bonus, that +1 maximum shield field module. If you're looking at using something like a Cormorant Guardian, it's all about that shield field module, and I will put a link above this video right now, it should be at the top of the screen here, on my video on how the Thrasher Guardian works. Emulate that fitting for the Cormorant Guardian, because that is what they do. The only difference is, obviously, for the Thrasher Guardian, I'm using cannons, where for the Cormorant Guardian, you're going to be wanting to use railguns. And this is one of the few times where actually the Cormorant Guardian is going to be better using the rifled railguns rather than snub-nosed, simply because damage is not your priority in a Cormorant Guardian, survivability is. And so that additional range becomes vital. Now, it's worth mentioning that in both the open beta test and the final beta test, at Tech Level 6 there was also the Cormorant Interdictor. Now, Interdictors aren't in the game currently, but we do know that there's a big update coming approximately in November time that will include the Interdiction Sphere launchers. That, I would assume, then means that the Interdictors will be coming back at Tech Level 6. Obviously, I'm not going to talk about them in this video, because they're not in the game yet, and I will do a video on Interdictors when they finally arrive. Secondly as well, Cormorant Covert Ops is a thing at all the way up at tech level 10. Again, not something I'm going to talk about in this video, simply because we just don't have access to this for a long time yet, but have a look at this, see if you can figure out what this ship's about and what it's going to do, how you would use it, and just consider it as a possible end version of the Cormorant line. Just something to look forward to in the future. And there we have it, everything that you need to know about getting started with and progressing through the Cormorant line of destroyers. If you're a budding Caldari destroyer pilot, these are excellent ships to get into, especially if you like your railguns and your very aggressive up-close and personal TM playstyle. Great for getting right up into your opponent's grill and dishing out all kinds of pain to them. Anyway, that's just my thoughts and my opinions on the Cormorant line of destroyers. If you're using these ships, let me know in the comment section down below how you're finding them. How do you fit them? What kind of upgrades do you use? All that jazz. Let me know in the comment section down below. Come find me on social media. Take some screenshots of your Cormorants. I love this ship so much, how it looks. Really cool looking ship, especially with how it all folds up and unfolds when it moves through warp. Do check that out. Zoom your camera right in and watch it. Very, very cool ship. Anyway folks, that just about wraps up everything I wanted to say. Thank you for listening right to the end. Happy sailing, and see you in New Eden!